Good morning, Tim. Thanks for joining us so
Good.
bright and early.
Yes, a very good morning from my side too. Happy to be here. It was a good way to wake up in the morning to know that I'll be on this. I'll be having a fireside chat with you this morning.
That's good. So thanks to Lei Hun, who's actually set it up for us, and she talked about how complex supply chains are. And indeed, transportation and logistics are indeed critical and essential enablers of global trade. And we have actually seen this even more apparently so during the pandemic, where freight transport was actually required to deliver essentials and keep the global economy going. And suddenly, resilience, just in case, instead of just in time, became a cornerstone of sustainable logistics. Amidst all the trepidation around global supply chain disruptions. But while the world battled with COVID-19 in the past 2 years, the effects of climate change has actually further compounded supply chain disruptions. We've got the Rhine River floods, we had Hurricane Ida, and we had Port Klang back home. And that has actually sent ripples throughout the supply chain. Now, maybe Tim, from your perspective, share with us how has COVID-19 made the industry more aware of the importance of supply chain resilience, and whether that has actually put the brakes on, put the brakes on for companies in their quest for net zero.
Well, Juliet, thank you very much. And that's a really good question. And it's also a question, I think, that really seriously showed that the COVID-19 situation created a perfect storm for the logistics industry. And we have to differentiate it a bit between the logistic companies, carriers, and freight forwarders. But at the same time, it also has shown the flexibility of the industry in really making things happen. Because, in the beginning of 2020, when everything went into a sort of lockdown situation around the globe, it was also very difficult for the participants to really know what they had to do. And it was a real learning experience for everyone. And I'm really proud to say that we at DHL never really dropped the ball. And we also still were able to manage we were actually very well managing the supply chains of our customers, of course, with disruptions within them, because we had to learn as we went along. I think it's also important that has changed the way that our customers see their own supply chains, because they've noticed that the things that we saw in the past, when everything somehow worked because of the major capacity, be it in air freight or ocean freight on the market, that these things which were suddenly not there anymore made things very difficult. So I think for our customers, it's important to have a more resilient supply chain, to understand more what can be done and should be done to make sure that the supply chain works in any situation. And don't forget, we also had the blockage of the Suez Canal in 2020, which was also something on top of the entire situation that we were already in. But one thing is also important. I think that even though we had these disruptions, the theme and the discussions on sustainable transport always kept on going, because there are so many different stakeholders, be it within the companies, be it from shareholders, be it from end customers, who really said that we need to do something and continue to do something when it comes to sustainable transportation. And to be really honest, there's no real alternative for all of us. Climate change is a matter of fact, and we have to do something, and we only have one planet. So overall, I think we noticed that more and more global companies are really setting their own emission targets in line with the Paris Agreement and on the science-based target initiatives. And we observe more and more market players committing themselves also to sustainable goals.
Yeah, so thanks for that. Through the pandemic, just continuing on this, the demand for last mile deliveries has actually also picked up, right? Driven by e-commerce. And
Yes.
suddenly there's the scarcity of shipping capacity, high cost of air and ocean trade, suddenly international road and rail became quite attractive. What are the different considerations in decarbonizing long-distance commercial freight and urban deliveries? Do you think that urban planners are actually doing enough to actually focus on sustainability?
Well, I think it's exactly what you're saying. And on top of that, because of the lockdown situations, people could not go into shops anymore, at least here in Europe. So everyone was starting to order more and more online. And I can tell you from experience within the company, but also in the street where I live here, there were more and more distribution vehicles to be seen from any kind of provider, bringing packages in amounts you haven't seen before. And we also believe as a company that these high volumes will stay, because the behavior and the way that customers work with these things, they also like the idea that they can do shopping at night or they can do shopping on the weekend. And please bear in mind, here in Germany at least, Sundays shops are still closed. So there is still a difference here also of the different regions. And I think that's also important that regions and countries are looking probably at different ways of doing it. What we clearly see is that for distribution, for the urban delivery, so first and last mile delivery, electric drives are definitely a good solution. And it's all about making sure you use the different alternatives that car manufacturers or transportation companies give to you. And it's more of being a first adopter and really doing things and not waiting for everything to be set up. So we see it here in Germany also, we see it in Europe, that more and more of the companies are really investing into electric vehicles. We at Deutsche Post DHL, for example, developed our own distribution vehicle, electric, called the street scooter. But there was no real infrastructure to load the car electrically outside of our own depots, which we use then. And normally, typically, you have for that kind of distribution, you need 40 to 60 kilometers, and that's easily to be loaded again electrically overnight. So that worked very well. Or for the long distance, there are different alternatives. Here hydrogen seems to be our best way going forward. But here we need much more support by governments in order to get up a real hydrogen infrastructure to support hydrogen trucking going forward. Electric doesn't seem to work. We are testing as a company different ways of doing it, but we believe that hydrogen will be the way forward. And last but not least, of course, rail. But rail has also its challenges. But here again, it's really important to try to use the rail, the cargo rail, to try to use their ideas and their opportunities and not to discuss too long why things are not working with the rail transportation. I think for our customers, it's important if we go to a more sustainable rail transportation, we do have to have a bit more. We need to allow a bit more transit time because of handling other things that you have around it. But again, this is a bit different throughout the world, and it's even a bit different in the different countries within Europe.
Yep. So everyone's kind of like talked about hydrogen and so on. But Tim, let me ask you. I've actually seen pictures of airships. What do you think of them?
Well, airships is something that has really been on the market for a long time, and the ideas have also been there, especially for heavy cargo, for project shipments, for example. So and there were lots of ideas in Germany. There was an idea called the cargo beamer at the time, which was also hyped a lot and was supposed to be the thing for the future. At the end of the day, the technology didn't work. But I think, again, here, if we have early adopters, if we invest into technology, we will be able to use these ideas and these modes of transport, and anything which supports a sustainable agenda or an environmental friendly agenda should be used and tried out.
So let's switch gears a little, right? So global freight networks really is essentially a shared network. You're really relying on every parties and stakeholders within the ecosystem to actually move that freight. Has it really been easy from your perspective? Because we've heard from all the airline guys, the aircraft manufacturers, the shipping guys, and the land guys in the two panels before this. But has it really been that easy to actually work with all the stakeholders in the industry to actually band together and scale for decarbonization?
Well, I think it has been easy to have a common subject and has been easy to have real good discussions on what can be done and how it can be done going forward. I see a strong interest from all parts, and I also see good ideas, lighthouse projects, which are also being used a lot and talked a lot about in social media or press publications to show what is doable. I think what's really important on this is, of course, that everyone also tries to understand what their own footprint is and tries to set themselves clear targets how to reduce it. Just to give you an example for our company, so we've been on the sustainable journey since probably 20 years, and since 15 years, we have internally what we call the Go Green initiative, where we, together with our employees, work on certain offsetting projects for a long time to really support also society and other things. In 2017, we declared to be had to have zero emissions by 2050. And we developed a roadmap on how to get there also. And for example, in 2020, our emissions were around 33 million tons of CO2 as a group. And remember, we are a group of close to 600,000 employees spread around the world, and you know our brand very well. We figured out that if we continue to grow the business as we are growing it, we would come up to CO2 emissions of 46 million tons by 2030, based on our growth assumptions of how GDP will do and how the markets will do. And our objective today is to be at lower than 29 million by 2030. And I think it's really important to have these kind of objectives within companies and also measure yourself against them. Even think about paying out a part of the bonus based on the achievement of these objectives in order to really push more in the push more in the market, and push more with all the people that are there. Because it's always easy to say, yeah, I can't do this because of this, or I can't do that because of that. I think it's really important to be early adopters. I think it's really important to push hard. We, for example, are saying we're going to invest around 7 billion euros for climate neutral logistics solutions until 2030. We are investing heavily in making sure that all our buildings are CO2 neutral and all these things. And of course, we are also seeing that our customers are asking much more for it. And all large customers who have science-based targets will be forced, in a way, if that's the right word, to go in that direction and to support this. But what we also see is a huge pressure from our own employees to make sure that we as a company go in this direction. Because a lot of employees want to work in a company which is really focusing on making sure that the environmental part of ESG, not to forget the S and the G, of course, in ESG, have a real high priority and need to be embedded in the corporate strategy. And I think we see that coming up more and more. And I think also the discussions on greenwashing and these things will ease away as things calm down, maybe now also based on the pandemic situation. And this will be a more and more stronger focus for everyone involved in the industry.
Yep. So Tim, I just want to pick up on the point you mentioned, go green. And you've done this for many years now, right? 2 decades. And we know that when end customers are willing to pay a premium for green products, the freight industry can actually increase the green offerings and improve top-line growth. I would like you to kind of like help us share the experiences you have. How have you actually gone out and encourage your customers to actually pay up for the green shipping? And how do you encourage, and then I think you've got a couple of other products, right? Whether it's carbon insets. We actually talk a lot about carbon offsets, but DHL actually talks a lot about carbon insets and book and claim. And you've got other products like good shipping and so on and so forth. I think it would be useful for you to kind of like maybe expound on this and tell and share with the audience as to how you have actually engaged them. How do you see the shippers and forwarders actually use book and claim mechanism to actually help push this agenda?
Okay, maybe you start with Go Green. I joined Deutsche Post 5 years ago, and I was deeply impressed from day one on how the employees took on the Go Green initiatives, which we have inside the organization. And at the time, it was all about planting trees, supporting the environment you lived in, and these kind of things, which in a way also, especially the planting trees part, is probably also an offsetting approach. But parallel to that, it was also all about measuring the CO2 emissions for customers, supporting them in understanding. And since it was such a part of the culture within the organization, it also made it easier for sales reps, operational people to talk to customers about what we were doing as a company, but what's also possible to do if you start looking into these kind of initiatives. And I think book and claim is a very good way forward, because we believe that offsetting, where you try to find certain projects which help you to compensate the CO2 that you are using, is one way to do it. But the more efficient way to do it is to really burn clean, meaning that you use sustainable aviation fuel and you use sustainable marine fuel. And the book and claim mechanism works in such a way that we believe we have one atmosphere, or we know we have one atmosphere, and it doesn't matter if the shipment for customer A is really based on sustainable aviation fuel and air freight. We will make sure that we use sustainable aviation fuel somewhere in the atmosphere, together with a third party, go shipping for ocean freight, for example, or others. We can then produce certificates that the customer can use to also prove that he in his supply chain is minimizing his CO2. And that is working really well. You can do this different ways. You can do this either by using our customer interface platform called MyDHLI, which supports this, where you can book online a shipment in this direction using that claim mechanism. Or if you're a larger customer, of course, we can also set up trade lanes working on this. And again, we see a lot of great support from our customers. We see a lot of good movements here, and we are buying heavily and getting more and more sustainable aviation and marine fuel in order to support these initiatives from our customers. And I strongly believe going forward, this is going to be a license to operate, and we will see more and more products, like we see, for example, in the food segment, where we have fair trade certificates on the food that we buy, on the coffee or the chocolate that we buy. We will see more and more as end consumer the sustainability certificates on the products that we buy. We might even pay a bit more for them, as we are used maybe to pay more for fair traded goods. So I think the push is there. It's becoming in a way also easy to sell to our customers. And like 4 or 5 years ago, I would have spoken to I speak to our customers. At that time, the discussion was still more minimal, and you had to speak to experts about this. Today, if you speak to logistics managers, they will all have an agenda and understanding. And I was at a OEM automotive congress the other day here in Germany. And there we also spoke mostly about how to set up sustainable solutions using book and claim, but also using how can we use the rail more? How can we make sure that we also optimize, that we make sure that we optimize the transportation to have more volume in the trucks or in the containers to order then reduce emissions again. But you notice and you see around the world with our customers that this is becoming more and more of a topic for them, and it's really being pushed because I think they also sense it will be the license to operate in the future. And I think if the pandemic situation wouldn't be so hard as it is at the moment with international supply chains, the pressure from our customers to work on these topics would even be greater.
Yes, so that's useful because essentially says no more excuses. There are ways of getting around this. Never mind that sustainable aviation fuel is going to be further out, but there are ways of getting this done. So and paying up, and customers can actually pay up a premium, and that money, the capital, goes towards investing into sustainable solutions and technologies. That's exactly what DHL has done. So I'm kind of mindful of time. If you have one key message that you would like to leave with the audience on how we can drive sustainable freight and logistics, what would that be?
I think my key message would be just do it. Take the Nike slogan and just do it. Be an early adopter. Talk to your partners in the supply chain. Use them also, because all of the competitors and carriers also have good ideas to how they can support customers in minimizing the CO2 emissions of the supply chain. Work together with them and trust them that together it's the only way where we can save and make sure that these developments that we see on CO2 emissions will be, first of all, stopped and then hopefully in future also minimized. I think it's just one thing, and I always like to call it, it's the license to operate that we all need. And I think it's really, really important to start talking about this and working around this.
Yeah, so on that note, thank you very much. And just to repeat what Steve said last night at dinner, just go all in and accelerate towards net zero. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you.